Okay, let's
can do that.
go to let's call this meeting to order. In roll call, I'm Michael O'Neill, Chair of the Advisory Housing Trust Fund Advisory Board.
John Roush,
Vice
member.
Chair. I guess we're Chair.
Vice Chair. Yeah, Vice Chair.
And,
Stephanie Bull, member.
And Pichette City.
Rachel Bull,
Yeah.
Paul Weber, member.
And April Sparks, city staff. So we have a quorum and we can proceed.
Sorry. See you, Stephanie. Alrighty. First before we get to our agenda item for minutes, we just want to discuss the resolution related to meeting participation, just as a reminder.
Thank you, Chair O'Neill. I did send it out to all of you, but I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. The City Commission
Just give us a best of.
adopted a resolution allowing for electronic public meetings, and then it includes their policy. And so in it, just so everyone knows, this specific advisory board, I've been told, has only been on Zoom. So now we have meeting rooms reserved going forward for this calendar year. So you'll be able to come in person. Also, if you have a reason that you're not able to come in person, there's a whole outlined list in the resolution. So there's lots of reasons that a person might not be able to come. You're still able to come via Zoom. It's just that going forward, that if you plan to participate electronically, you'll just need to notify chair and staff. We are going to need to communicate with the city clerk about how that works, since we can't have members group emailing back and forth with the chair, because then that's the reason you all get BCC'd on everything, is to make sure we don't have a quorum in email. So we try to be real careful with that. So I'll find out for sure the exact steps. It might just be that you email staff and then we forward it to the officer. So just so you know, there's lots of opportunity. We want to make sure everybody still has a way to participate. So if you'll just look through that, just know that we will have meeting rooms here now. And I know we do have Riley trying to get on too. So I'll send out another reminder to kind of look through this with any more details I can get for you all.
My quick read says, as to today's meeting, we could have a 2/3 vote to accept people to participate remotely, right? That's one of the reasons we can approve someone participating remotely. You don't have to join the army or health records.
And it's
my
just
read of it,
50%.
50% of the time. Okay.
And Riley has joined us.
Okay. Very good. Hey.
Welcome, Riley.
Hi, Riley. Thanks.
Hi, Riley.
Okay, we got a good turnout. Very good.
Hey,
All right.
everyone, sorry I couldn't be there.
Yeah, just going over the resolution and just expectations of attendance in person when possible, or at least 50% of the time. So
I'll be
look
back
at
real quick. I'm gonna go grab a headset so I can hear better.
Okay. Alrighty, first on the agenda are the minutes from July 2024. I didn't even look at those, they were, okay. Okay, we entertain a motion for adopting those minutes, please.
I can make a motion.
Okay, Stephanie.
I'll second that.
Made the initial motion, John seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, the same. Passes.
And Chair, if I can check with April real fast, our meeting minutes, I think we need to do roll call on now in the new process.
In the new process, it does say we need to do a roll call vote, but I think we'll be fine right now. We can institute that in future meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I have to do that.
but
across
for
all
the
three
record,
boards.
it was a unanimous vote of all present, so. Ready? And there we go. Next agenda items are our regular items, project updates.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to give everybody an update for those of you who maybe don't just drive around neighborhoods like some of us do. The Twin Creek apartment project that the trust fund funded has really been moving forward quickly, which is really exciting. And so they'll actually be starting their quarterly reporting. So if that's something that the board would like to have updates on at future meetings, seems like it might be useful, but you can let me know your desires once we have those
We can maybe
going
move
forward.
a site visit thrown in.
Yep,
That'd
and
be
if
fun.
you know, if you wanna hear from them, that's probably something we can also arrange. I just wanted to let you know, I mean, I know it was a long process from the time they first applied until they got all of their other funding and they were successful in all of their other parts. And now we have a structure going up, which is gonna be really exciting for housing. So since it's the first project, I just wanted to give an update that yes, it's going forward. Yes, they have broken ground. I don't know if any of you went to the groundbreaking.
I did, yeah,
Did you?
Did you?
Okay,
it was good. Yeah, it was well attended, lots of people.
wonderful. So maybe just think about it and let me know if that's something that going forward, you know, we wanna hear from them, or if you just want a quick 2 bullet points from staff based on their quarterly reports, just think about it. And then I can float that out to them to see, you know, if they wanna join us by Zoom or give quick updates. Just whatever the will of the group is for what you'd like to know about projects that you've funded.
We would welcome updates as to progress toward completion, estimated timeline for completion, stuff like that. And I think people may be, it wouldn't be too disruptive. I think Seth and Tyson would welcome when the time is right for us to
Take a walkabout.
go take a
Yeah.
walkabout once they close everything in, if it's not closed in already. We don't wanna be inactive, but be a little perk for the committee to stay on top of what's happening. You know, that is exciting. Everything takes a lot longer, and those guys stuck with it. So good deal. Any other things pending? I would just update the group that the HHA is proceeding on their repositioning, which would look like we may be in a situation to we will be putting our funding together in 2025 so for all 366 of our public housing units. And then if we can reposition them out of the low income public housing program, we would then also have perhaps opportunity to develop on existing public housing property and adjacent property over 100 plus additional units. So that's in the works. I would somewhat related, I think, a benefit to all affordable housing in the state of Montana and certainly here in Lewis and Clark County. I don't know if this group I've mentioned it, but fair market rents are the basis for establishing what's called the payment standard in the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 program. It's also used for establishing rental assistance payment standards and other HUD programs. It's the basis for what's called the home rent in terms of a HUD program and other. It's a very important housing metric used for establishing HUD funding. Ours in Lewis and Clark County and Montana has got way off due to the exploding rents. So far off, it was just ridiculous. So the voucher programs couldn't barely function. We were at success rates in the mid 30% range, which means so close to 70% of the time you got a voucher, you couldn't find housing because there wasn't supply or fair market rent. You can generally under standard rules, you can set the payment standard at 110% of fair market rent, and with a waiver, 120% currently. And we were able to, we established at that. We've been working on it, going on 2 years almost, but really hitting it hard for 18 months. A year ago, we were all around the table. This year, we took it to DC. We had Senator Tester and Congressman Zinke separately use their full 7 minutes, whatever, on the HUD oversight committees in their houses to speak directly to the acting HUD secretary about the problem in Montana. We did see significant improvement for 2025, 30% increase in Lewis and Clark County, 19% overall in the state of Montana, the #1 biggest improvement across the country and one of the biggest in history. That wasn't good enough for us because our rents have gone up 60%. So we put together, we were working on a local, what's called an FMR reevaluation with the city and county and this Department of Commerce Housing Division. But then we also, on a separate track, we're working on a statewide, getting funding for statewide, which we did get and achieve this summer. And so as of 11:30 this morning, this report and all the data files were submitted to HUD. And so we would expect, we think we've created the basis for raising fair market rent significantly, double digits higher across the state of Montana, including locally. HUD makes the final determination. This project identified and did direct mail to over 100,000 targeted rental households across the state of Montana. We got statistically valid response rate, and the distribution of that was primarily in our larger communities in the state, and but still a real solid response. And we've sliced and diced the data in a variety of ways, and any way you look at it or however you group it, I think Montana and Lewis and Clark County should be seeing a big boost in their fair market rents. So that's important in terms of bringing it. It allows for folks to actually rent decent, affordable homes using their vouchers and make sure landlords and developers are paid a rent that cover their costs. And it also increases, the fair market rent is part of our inflationary adjuster for our budget authority for the program. And so like this year with the boost to 30% we saw a $500,000 additional budget authority, assuming we get a budget eventually, which is now pushed off to March 15th or something. But we are proceeding on that basis. And so it's all where we had been was that they were stripping Montana millions of dollars out of Montana because we weren't using our vouchers. The way the system works, you use it or lose it. They don't ask, well, we've set up a system where you can't use it. They don't, so good news there. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have some good news on increases on that. But that will also stimulate development. So because people can use vouchers. We weren't even, our payment standards were below the tax credit rents, like at Twin Creeks. They weren't. That's a subsidized rent. Our vouchers, all over the state were like that. So, and in some places, like the fair market rent's 170% of the tax credit rent. Ours was below, so we were way off. So that's that update. Next, any questions on any of the project updates? No. All right, Ann, want to tee off on the program guidelines and what we have in front of us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So after going through for the board to go through the full start to finish, an application, application process, taking then the recommendations to the commission, getting a project funded, then the project actually signing loan documents once they got all of their other funders. We've now gone through the full process for the first time. And so taking a look at how that process went, some possible lessons learned, ideas about how maybe to make the program potentially more sustainable for future. We just want to have a talk about the guidelines and the meeting packet online, and for those of you in the room printed, has a kind of start to some potential changes and thoughts.
And where are
the
these
guidelines.
comments from?
So the comments in the version you're seeing now are from staff,
Okay.
just to get the discussion started. We want to have, and this may be more than just today's meeting too. So think about it. I just don't want, I just want to remind you, don't meet with each other about this outside of here, but it's okay to take it home and think about it outside of here. We just can't have the board meeting outside of this meeting. And so some thoughts about how the first project went, what sorts of things were allowable in the guidelines that maybe we do or do not want to have going forward. Some of it too is maybe thoughts about whether the board wants to encourage potentially smaller projects, if we want to change dollar amounts available, knowing that there's just under $1 million left in the fund following this first project funded. So if another large project came in and asked for the maximum $1 million that's currently in here, then the fund would have very little funds for quite a few years based on how we allow it. And
Well, we certainly would, I mean, we're barely, our feet wet. We've awarded one project, and I would just say that we had expected or hoped that the city would not limit itself to the 2 million that were originally part of their future funding would be. And so in my sense, it would be premature to start trying to. I mean, the truth of the matter, most projects, multifamily rental, scope and scale is an important thing. Encouraging smaller projects actually means that the cost per the transaction per unit goes through the ceiling, and the only way you can make them work is by having a scope and scale. But there's nothing in the existing that keeps small projects from applying. So, like, I think we, in our original take on this, we thought it would serve multifamily rentals potentially, but it could also be small, like home ownership transactions, things like we spent some time even making sure that home buyer didn't have to be new construction, it could support kind of home buyer assistance. Since then, the CRO thing is getting underway. Hopefully, might even be able. Those kind of things might play out, but I do think we spent a fair amount of time trying to make it flexible so it's not exclusive to large needs. But I think we thought there might be, some from on the small end, like a habitat type of help provide a little support for local times here in the city of Helena. They've been picking up small, projects like in part 1 or 2 parcels at a time rather. Now, of course, they're planning the big East Helena one that's big subdivision, but so is there areas where you would like specific? Should we go through the?
sorry, could you hand me one of those, please?
Should we go through the? I think the first comments start on in section 5.
Yes, but we can start at the beginning too, in case any of you have thoughts. And like I said, this might be a more than one meeting thought, but we just want to figure out how to best Can those of you on Zoom see it on your screen yet?
No, I don't
No.
think I can share the screen.
I was about to ask if these been distributed digitally or if,
It's on the website where you found your agenda for today's meeting
oh, okay.
under item.
Let me go find it.
That might be the best way. I'm so sorry. This conference room, being able to share screens is a little different than when we did it from our desktops. And so it may or may not
Don't think I can share.
be something that you can see right now.
No.
April's trying it, but if you go to the board website,
I found the document on the board website. I hope Rachel can find her way. You're good? All right, I think we're caught up then.
perfect. So some of the thoughts, some of the kind of overarching large part of this is there's been some thoughts about potentially changing the area median income thresholds to really focus on the even lower income potentially. Also, a lot of it is kind of very specific, but potentially making sure we're not allowing for ongoing expenses to be something that an entity would apply for.
I don't think there's anything in here that would pay
Well,
operating or owning affordable housing. We did
is
allow that.
somehow trying to figure out if that
Yeah.
phrase potentially allows for it. And as a reminder, many of these specific bullet points on page 2 and 3 come directly from the resolution. So there are multiple steps to being able to change anything we want to change, right? The city commission needs to approve it. Any guideline, or they approved the guidelines, so they will need to approve any changes. So like I said, this might be a little bit more than one meeting's discussion, but how we balance encouraging entities to apply and making sure that we're doing what's fiscally responsible. There are also some sections that things like allowing payments to be made by cash flow or interest only payments. Those are the sorts of things that will affect the amount in the funds if no principal is being paid back over the time frame until the end. So that's kind of the background of where we're coming from to get advice from all of you on what your thoughts are and preferences are now that we've gone through one project. And it might take more than one project, but I do think there are some parts that we want to make sure are really more clarified. Different parts about making sure that the city is involved in any discussions with all the other funders when the developers are meeting with multiple funders for months and months and months to get to it. City needs to be at the table for those. You know, how we make sure that's clear in the guidelines that we're a participant to be part of that.
Why? You
So
make a
the-
loan document, yeah, and you get a position. They want to be at every meeting. Okay.
No, not, I mean, like for a bank loan, you wouldn't be invited into the room.
No.
Confidential.
Oh, it's with the other funders that are already there when they're discussing loan terms and changes they want to loan documents.
Right. So there isn't necessarily a meeting. If there may be some change in so some sort of notice that if there's going to be a change but your loan documents, you can't change. The whole stack is like all tied together. So there may be, they wouldn't be able to change the terms of the city loan without permission of the city regardless. I mean.
Right, up until signing though, there were lots of requests and discussions
Discussions
to
to
want to
change,
change
right.
it, so we need to be part of those
Oh.
discussions to know what's being asked of the city,
Right.
that
But-
kind of thing, to
But
make
I mean,
sure up until then.
didn't they make a formal request to the city to change the terms?
They did.
Yeah.
Very close to the end.
Also, maybe that needs to go back through an approval process
Mhm.
then if it's really changed the terms of what we approved or
Well, the
submitted for
nature-
approval.
the
Yeah,
Nature of this project, particularly the nature of the time and environment and the current environment we're in, I don't think there was any, the goal is to deliver the project.
right.
So, but there's any change, I mean, it gets at the documents, and I'm assuming, I know your documents are sound, that any change to the documents must only be at the approval of the city, so.
Yeah,
I don't see, because with things changing, things change in terms of evaluation of, say, the tax credits with that transaction, like there's different terms, interest rates rise, different things come into play, and so there may be some fee structure that needs to be put in if the nature of the change is such that it has to be sent back to NaturWorks Montana for reevaluation in terms of
Transfer
its, you don't wanna just willy-nilly, oh, okay, we'll make that change, particularly if it's significant, that you might go, well, you don't wanna over subsidize or whatever, or why. But
can we know or have access to what that final loan term and package ended up to be, so we can see kind of the repayment of principal, things like that, on this specific loan?
I would think so.
We can send out.
Yeah, I think we
Documents, yeah.
can.
well, I don't know if you even need the documents, but
No,
the
but
final
just-
thing, I think we said,
Yeah.
we thought, and I think it came back to us and we made once
It did come back to us once for approval of
approval of
Yeah,
change.
Additional funds, wasn't it?
Yeah,
based on-
more.
More
Yeah.
funds
Well,
and they
Longer term
wanted
interest
Where,
only.
where they, yeah, the
interests,
yeah.
restructuring, it's like keeping more long-term.
Yep.
The one that I believe did not come back to you was when they needed to change their entity name because they had to split their 9% and
And 4%,
4%.
right.
And they needed the funds to go into one
side or the other.
one
Yeah,
side or
sorry.
the other, and it couldn't be that it was awarded to United Housing Partners.
Oh,
Because when they applied, they
Sure.
didn't have those other entities,
Gotcha.
so we do have a section we added in here that we need to know ahead of time if they're trying to change that, because that's something that the commission has to approve. It's not, staff can't just say, okay, change the name. So just some
Yeah,
kind
I
of
mean, some of it might be
little
some
things.
boilerplate, it's like in the nature of a 9% and 4% deal that you're gonna have different legal entities, but
And then also one of the other sections, we talked about whether it maybe needs to be updated from the time. The lending environment has changed a lot since these guidelines were first put into place. So as an example, page 7, we're talking about loan terms. Is it in the benefit of the trust fund and to still be beneficial to a developer as well, to potentially change some of the loan terms? So if we're looking at 7%, the 1% funds from the city is a really good incentive. But interest rates were very different when this was put together, so I don't know if we wanna tie it to prime. We've had some discussions about potentially tying it to prime rate to make sure that funds are coming back in so that additional projects can then going out. So that's kind of the overview of why this discussion has come up, that we want your expertise.
just some
thoughts.
feedback, I mean, I guess they can be in opposition to each other. We can build the loan fund, but I don't think that was the purpose for the creation of the loan
No.
fund. The loan fund was to create housing.
Right.
It's only gotten harder to create housing since we've done this.
I personally don't have any heartburn about the idea of being unemployed on this committee for, 5 years. If it takes a while to get money back into that fund, we've done our job, get it out.
Mhm.
At least that's how I feel about it. We should be spending this money as quickly as we can.
But I mean, I think and then, certainly marshaling the funds and getting them out is the quickest way of going. Should we put more funds in as a city, and was it a valuable investment? That's the way this is set up.
Exactly. That's something for the city commission to figure out.
And
the
decide.
budget Process is, like, here's this attempt to nurture more affordable housing, and it works. But if we don't have any money left in the pot that we set up for it, isn't that what we want?
So when we're all said and done with, say, the Twin Creeks or any project, the city will, this board and then the commission will review, was it a smart investment? So we have, roughly $1 million tied up in Twin Creeks. Some of it's coming back sooner than later, others a little longer term.
Right.
But we have 72 units of affordable housing. And when they're done, it's not done yet, but when it's done, we're gonna say, was that a good investment? So if the
Right.
city's $1 million investment leveraged something like 34 to 1, something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
I don't know what the number is.
it's,
Yeah.
but I don't know what their total final, do you know what their final?
Please don't quote me, but I definitely believe it's more than 25 to 1.
Yeah.
On your return.
Pretty good. Well, I think
Especially
that,
when the requirement is high,
Yeah.
right?
so-
Like
Yeah,
this
exactly.
was a piece, and we continue to hear from them and
Sure.
other individuals who are familiar with the process, that with Board of Housing and other funders, that having a city trust fund have funds approved to be part of that funding stack is potentially, they all believed that was one of the pieces
Oh,
that put them
absolutely.
over the top to get approved. And
Oh,
so
good.
the real
Good.
importance of having
Yeah.
Oh, there's no doubt.
local investment and yes,
We- you know,
we've got skin in the game.
We've been in this,
and-
go
Yeah,
back a while. So we were all there. Some of us were at the meeting. That was
Yeah.
definitely, and so it's any local, I mean, before, for the city of Helena, what was the local contribution? Well, city staff posted some public meeting notices, $1 million
Right.
doesn't build the housing, but it catches their attention that this is a serious,
Yep.
the city is making a serious investment in that. And the city is paying a lot of the current housing crisis is having a tremendous burden on the city.
Well,
And so-
you would need to hire a dedicated economist to actually talk through the economic impact that $1 million has
Sure.
in the health and well-being of the city itself.
Yeah.
But it's a much more significant number than 25 to 1.
Yeah.
Much.
Much
oh
great,
yeah,
yeah,
that's
so
just for the getting it built.
that's just getting
not
it
even-
better. So that's, no, I know we have a,
Yes.
so you got a direct contribution of going to contractors and local material vendors and things like that.
Yeah.
And wages
All of those
paid,
dollars you'd spend 7 times
Yeah.
for,
and to what degree does that come back? But then what is very hard to, is what is the economic benefit of having homes for workers? And we can't have a workforce if there's no place for people to live. We can't, what is the cost of not having housing? I mean, I'm seeing elderly people in wheelchairs under piles of blankets on the streets. What's the cost of that? What's the cost, we're seeing, so 25 to 1. It's pretty darn good. Point to anything else that's getting a 25 to 1 as a minimum return on investment, and so I think when we're done, I think Twin Creeks was a great project and it's gonna get done. And but it gets to I don't think we wanna, in my opinion, I don't think we should make it to say the 0 to 80 is the standard affordable definition of affordable housing. And it's usually like 0 to 60
Oh.
for like low income housing tax credit, but they changed federal low income housing tax credit so that you can have what's called income averaging. And so if you look at the Twin Creeks, they're sort of sub 70%, and so they can go lower to allow them to do lower, and that's allowed under the regulation. For affordable home ownership, that's usually been 80%, but given our costs, that's why we this was all written before things went truly insane. But it's more so that there's probably reason to say that it would be legitimate, the city to provide some support for other housing needs, because we have, you know, first responders, teachers, nurses, all those kind of who can't afford just your regular, I mean, people with good jobs can't afford, my kids are, you know, that it's, their rents are much higher than any of us who bought our house a long time ago. What we're paying for our mortgages at a 1-bedroom apartment is, you know, $1,400 or something, you know, it's like, so, I mean, I think because we have a committee that's reviewing this and we're, you know, if someone comes in and asks for $1 million to do something, we're probably not gonna give $1 million out to something that's gonna serve a higher income kind of thing. It might be, they might be able to come and say, well, there's, you know, with $200,000, we'll be able to get this project done. And that we'll have some affordable homes and we'll put some restriction on it. One of the things that is kind of like what's the building across from our place? The initial,
The Sealy building.
the Sealy building, where they ended up putting a deed restriction on it, making affordable. But this was before prices went up, but I think the final unit cost for the affordable unit was like $425,000. That's, yeah, I think we learned some important lessons there. That wasn't part of this, but it was initial fledgling coming out of that sale of the bus station with the intent there that I think you want to maintain things that are flexible and not be any more restrictive than your standard like federal restrictions. And I think we were saying with this board and the city commission approval, you may be able to even go above and beyond, because there's some, say, in home ownership circles at the loan products and stuff that will go to 120%, and the CRO thing that has its challenges with that they've passed HB 819 last session is still kind of in play, which will provide home buyer down payment assistance funds. I think that caps out at 160. And so median income. So, I mean, I think with our 120%, you know, provide us a flexibility, because remember, adjusted median income is always going up, and it has gone up significantly local. So that itself is a pretty good deal. So I think you're right. I don't recall us wanting to be paying for operating expenses for programs or things like that. This would not be the appropriate.
And I don't know, just specifically to that one, I don't know that was the intent. But the idea of how it's listed out here, whether that then looks like it's allowable, is like, maybe should we be removing that? It is directly out of the resolution too of the use of funds. And so, you know, that's important to note that changes would need to be made there as well. But, you know, just some thoughts of, as someone reads this, do they think that is allowable and then become something that an entity is going to apply for?
Oh.
Right? And then say, well, but it allows it.
Yeah.
Well, does it? Or is that not really what they were trying to say here? And so that's part of what we really want to look at, is what sort of things maybe need to be tightened up in here, just to also make it easier. I know we've had some past discussions about, why don't we see more applications? And in some cases it's, I know one of the comments from the last meeting or the meeting before was that out in the world, some of you have heard developers say, well, but why, we don't want to have 35-year period of affordability and have to report all the time on it. And then the discussion becomes, is that right?
What? No, it's
When
in Montana now, it's 50 years. I mean, 35 years would be, I mean, it would be, I mean, someone.
Technically ours say 35 for $1 million,
35, yeah.
right? But that was part of the discussion, was like, oh, well, we don't want to do that. And so then it's like, well, this may not be the program
for you. Yeah.
right? And so I know we've had some of those discussions. So looking at some of these things, well, I don't know that really the intent was to actually provide the ongoing operational
no, no.
expenses, but then does it look like that to a potential applicant? How can
Yeah,
we make
no,
it
we're gonna scratch
as
that.
easy as possible for applicants to know
Yeah.
exactly what they're getting, right? That we wouldn't really have known until we went through a full process and looked to see what types of projects.
I don't recall that being part of it. We must have been thinking something.
I don't know.
I don't remember that being
I
part
don't
of
know
it.
the answer to that one either, but
It's in the resolution, right?
Would
So
it be
the city
useful-
commissioner has that language. No,
would a
it's put it right
developer
in.
find it useful to be able to look at like a one-page spec sheet, I guess, or example sheet of here's a successful project,
Yes, for sure.
and here's how they got it done. They built 70 units, they spent $35 million, we were the last $1 million in. They found funding sources just like this, and if you can copy that, we'd love to be a part of it. Find yourself a piece of dirt and get busy.
But we did allow a kind of, or at least anticipate it being some different types of projects, because a multifamily, like we would look for long and hard at a project that was a multifamily rental that didn't have these other funding sources, because that's, if you're not doing that, then that's, you're
What kind of marketing
That's right.
can we really do? I mean, and the state can really do. I mean, we can put it on the website and talk about it in the newspaper, but we're not gonna buy advertising to.
right. I mean, and the people are developing, the reason there haven't been any projects is that we've been struggling through all the things we have to do to get to a project, you know? And that's just, there is a lack of resources generally in the state of Montana. Other
Mhm.
people go, oh, why can't you be like Missoula? Missoula gets their own home and CDBG and other funds, and the city actually keeps refilling their trust fund. That they're not looking to, how do we build up that trust fund? No, it's they're pumping more money in every year, and it's probably, that should be more, if it can be done, if it's a good investment, I think it makes sense for us to examine what's coming out of it. But for a long time, until we're gonna have this housing struggles for a long time until we bring up our supply, and we'll have some, but there's other kinds of projects that where the expectation that you get a 35-to-1 return may be different. It would be harder to do that on affordable home ownership, especially in new construction, kind of like building things out, might not be there. It would be, I think we were looking, if you're building some sort of like transitional housing, or kind of more of a, even something along the lines of, say what United Way was proposing with their project out there. But what we, again, I think there would be other funding sources that we would expect them to be going to and applying for.
Yeah, that's number one in our priorities, right? And projects that maximize the utilization of outside financing.
And so,
Yeah, so we shouldn't let the program guidelines be a barrier to getting the funds out. And someone on eligible use, I just had a question. Donate? What are we donating?
That is also directly from
Okay.
the resolution, and that is one of the questions is,
they can donate, they don't have to, it doesn't have to be a loan. Is that what is meant by that?
that's one of the things that we think is maybe a little unclear and maybe needs to be clarified, whatever the intent may have been, or whether the word donate, that's in, one,
It's
two, it's in
donate
two
and then
different.
interest rate minimum
Oh,
of 1,
1%.
so yeah, I didn't understand that.
That's part of why it's, there is a thought to maybe
Okay.
not have, and what all of you think about that, because, right, if they're approved for these funds, then they would use the funds, maybe for the cost of land. That was one of the things that, Twin Creeks wanted to use some of the funds for, right? But the donating, we're not sure, if that's really effective in there or not.
And actually, in a lot of cases, you want, maybe the final thing would be almost a donation, but so like the cash flow loan. So loans that would be like say with a grant from the city to a tax credit deal. You don't get it, by making a grant, it's not eligible basis then, and the basis is what generates the tax credit, the low income housing tax credit. So the way they're structured is that they're shown with perhaps, you know, a minimum interest rate,
Yeah, low interest.
low interest loan, but with paid out of cash flow. And so if it doesn't cash flow until, you know, it may be year 20 when it starts kicking in, and it counts the full, it's all goes to basis. And so you're generating the 9% or the 4% tax credit off it. So, and again, we were trying to have some flexibility in here that it wasn't just multifamily rental. We recognize that there's a need to support homeownership if possible. In some cases, we just right. But a developer could come in who's building a, you know, say building a subdivision, and they would say, we're going to sell this, we're going to sell this property at, you know, affordable to a family at whatever thing, and for this, you know, grant would be, there'd be a deed restriction on the property, and that would have to be the case there, or that it, you know, which would go with the property, or it could go to the buyer, and then they can, when they sell the property, it then reverts back to the city, the equal share of the appreciated value equal to the original down, you know, what was the percentage of the original purchase that the city provided. And, you know, and that can be done in small increments. That's probably the easiest way of thinking, okay, we want to do small projects. We do, you know, a home buyer program that we already, you know, in Works Montana or whatever could make loans out of this if they came in and asked for, like, we would like to make 4 loans a year in conjunction with the home program that they already have access to, and some other things, you know. I mean, there's, I mean, I'm just throwing that out there, but there may be, I don't know, with the United Way could come in and ask for pieces of it, or, you know, there'd be a smaller ask that wouldn't be $1 million. So, but certainly you can spend a lot of time on a lot of, I think the fundamental purpose, we want to pump out units, right? So more is better, particularly those, you know, the other thing about the Twin Creeks is that because of its financing that is built in, that there's so many of the units are below 30%. Right. So
Yeah, I mean, the word provide could cover all of those things, so. That's
Oh, yes, instead
recommendation.
instead of having donate on those
'Cause the
3 bullets.
The section 6 is the trust fund or whatever, so yeah, C through G, I'll say provide, it's the same thing. Language changed, it's nothing to do with me, but yeah, that makes sense. Then you have the option to make it a grant if you want.
Because yeah, the prime rate minus 3% or 1% being the minimum threshold, big difference now because prime rate is
75.
so that's an example of something that is making it harder to develop housing rather than, you know.
Yeah, I think we still want it to be fair, really discounted, right? If we can.
Yeah.
That's kind of the goal.
So with that example, that would still then be a 4.25% discount. Right, like
You're
if
saying
you were
prime
talking
rate,
about,
what's the
oh, if
prime
it's
rate?
7, you know, if it's 7.5 today, you know, at the time.
But when we wrote this up, we were saying the minimum could be as low as 1%. So,
Which
so
is,
Well,
Right.
theoretically, the prime goes back to 4.
1% is still
3%
really-
below whatever prime is, that's 1%.
Right. I mean, it still would be very helpful to have 3 points below
Much-
prime rate,
Much cheaper money.
money,
Yeah.
much cheaper money.
3 points below prime rate is, it's a great way to look at it, but the other part of it is that, most of the money that you're gonna end up borrowing isn't at prime anyway, so that's
Yeah.
3% of discounted money. As a way to calculate it, but it, in effect, is really more like 5 or 6% off of whatever your loan would otherwise be.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, I
How
mean,
much?
we're pricing mid-7s, high-7s for commercial right now,
Yeah, okay,
for a prime customer.
anyway. It's a good deal.
Yeah.
It's a good deal, yeah.
Yeah.
Interest-only payments are not allowed. I don't like that because for construction, you gotta have an interest-only payment.
We don't
My
have
opinion.
interest only. They have been paying interest, haven't
Oh, the things in red
we?
are proposed
Okay.
changes. Things highlighted have the comments, so
I think
looking
maybe that
at,
means for like an extended term or something.
like, going forward, there will be principal being paid.
Yeah, we
After
necessarily
12
want to
months.
see that for 20 years, but I could certainly understand it getting done.
So are you thinking that you
There-
want to
there's-
allow, oh, sorry, we're on page 7 of the potential draft under loan terms. So are you thinking you'd like to still have interest only payments as an option for the
Construction. period.
construction,
Yeah,
but not
construction.
the,
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah,
this is listed
absolutely.
under the permanent
Yeah,
loans?
why would we do that? I mean, it's like, that's, again, it's beyond me why there's some other, what's going on that the city staff is sitting around adding things to make it harder? Is that what we're taking away, that our current environment is, let's make it harder rather than easier to use these funds? How is that something we want? How is the experience of having one project leave us with that kind of? Not that I don't want to be critical. I'm just like,
I think we just wanted to look at whether or not we want, so that's under the permanent loan section, whether we want to have permanent loans only paying 1% interest for 18 years, so there's less money coming back to revolve back out. And it's that whole balance that we've talked about of don't really we want
You're
funds to
saying that you
be
want-
being used, right?
Sure.
We want to be building units, we want funds
But
to
there
be
could
used,
still
but
be a construction.
do we
period.
want, do we want some of those funds to be revolving back before 18 years of the
Right.
actual
Well,
principal coming back, right? So thinking
Do we
about,
want to be writing loans that are always going to be 3% below whatever prime is? In other
And-
words,
Yeah,
it's a
that's
variable
another way to
rate
check.
loan that has to
Are
be
these
recalculated
fixed?
once a year.
Yeah, are these fixed for the full term?
oh, I
Yeah,
would think
yeah,
so, yeah.
You could.
Okay.
Is would just be at the time of application, right? So
Right.
if, when an entity applies and prime rate is 3%, then they're
They're
gonna
paying
ask
what?
for 1%, right?
Mhm.
Cause
I think we
3%, or.
we
if you just want
crosswalk
it to
this
be
to kind of
one-
like, what would be loan terms, like kind of home funds into a transaction, and I think the interest only payments are more on the construction loan side, but still that it was, I thought we were allowing for cash flow loans payments, so that it's only this 18-year term that you might not, during that 18-year term, you might not really be making
Oh.
payments, but it would still count as a loan, because I think that's where they ended up with the 18-year. So the tax credit compliance period is really the initial 15-year, and then a tail about 3 years. So after 18 years, you're kind of you can clear the decks on the tax credit. You still have to meet the tax credit requirements, but there's the risk of recapture is gone.
And as I'm reading this with your comments, I'm wondering if part of it is that it looks confusing because we start out with the loan terms for a permanent loan and then go to construction loan,
Oh,
right? Where maybe construction
get
would
confused.
potentially come first, so maybe having the construction loan information, I mean.
Yeah.
I guess my thought
Oh,
is
yeah,
too, if we're making any changes that has to go before the commission, then we want to make all the ones we potentially need, right? If there's
Okay.
a typo or any clarifications or anything, like if there's major changes, but also potentially any of the small ones, like if we're gonna take this, then, you know, change a typo, change whatever. So if it's that we
So
need to
that-
move that section up, and that's a recommendation, then so that it makes more sense. I do think there was some concern about when payments would or would not be made if they were repayable through cash flow. They currently were, that's a proposed cross out, is that is no longer allowable for
Yeah, what
permanent
page was
loans.
that on?
Which is-
Page 7.
Which is saying, let's make it harder.
Oh, right here, and they are repayable through cash flow. Oh, okay.
Because that was done intentionally, knowing how a lot of these loans are structured. That it doesn't, that you can make the project float, it comes in as a loan, so it doesn't eliminate it from basis. But that you only pay it back out of cash flow, so. And you know, you could maybe edit it to say, it may be structured as repayable through cash flow. So it wouldn't be a give me, you know, not all.
Yeah.
It really depends on what the nature of the project is. But I don't
Yeah,
think you
that
wanna limit.
repayable through cash flow, to me as a banker, that, I don't understand your world, Michael, and what those words mean to low income housing developers, so that, the definition of that maybe would be beneficial.
So when you see with these loans, these city loans are kind of considered soft financing. Meaning push comes to shove, it's not gonna take the project down.
Mhm.
So if you, in year 2, your cash flow isn't there, you know, on a regular loan, you make that loan payment or they come in and
Yeah.
seize the project. These loans aren't meant to be necessarily that way. They're secured, supposed to be secured. You can't like turn around, take the money and then sell the project, but that as long as you're doing what you're saying you're doing. And you may get,
So you can say my cash flow is less than 0, I
right,
don't have to make a payment. I
Yeah.
see.
and there's nuance to that, because
Sure.
cash flow can be bled off through structures and things like that, so.
Well, this, like at a bank, this would be, you would have some sort of a covenant in your loan documents just to say what your minimum cash flow would be, or
Right,
that you couldn't distribute funds to owners until you meet this
right,
requirement.
it was, yeah, the cash flow loan isn't after you've made the distribution to the ownership or the
Yeah,
partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This money comes out first, not last.
Yeah,
interesting. Okay.
but there is a place for interest only.
Yeah,
And
and I
also
was just
for
reading it
cash flow
wrong. She corrected me. Yeah, so the,
Oh,
there's
the
construction
permit.
with, yeah, interest only, actually, you don't even have to pay interest at all. There you go. During that time period for 3 years, and then before it would convert to a permanent loan. So yeah, my thought would be to move short-term funding to the top and go in order of time.
So like in Twin Creeks, what did the mix between construction and perm switch to? They didn't take a full million at permanent, right? They did $1 million for construction, but I think the permanent
Oh.
loan's less, right?
Yes, it's not,
800,000.
it's 800 instead of the 400 that's allowed
Okay,
by
yeah,
the
okay.
guidelines. So they had to come and ask
Ask,
for the increase and then ask the commission, which is allowed, the second to last paragraph on that page. Other terms requested may be considered case by case by the
Mhm.
commission. And so Um, so that's how that worked, because there was it allowed for that.
Okay.
The funds existed in the fund, and knowing that $400,000
Okay.
difference was going to make a difference in whether this project was
What's gonna work? Yeah.
work or not. And as you may recall, in the specifics of Twin Creek, when they first applied,
Yeah,
the
45
project
minutes.
was already over the match and, everything they
Yeah.
needed. But it was 26, I think, fewer units.
Yeah,
I mean,
45
so they
units
also
versus 72,
increased the
Right,
number of
right,
units as they progressed through. So remembering that an application that comes to this board is potentially coming very early on in development, and by the time
Right.
the markets
It will
change
change,
and money
yeah.
changes, things will potentially change, which is why they have to come back and ask
Mhm.
for any changes. But in
But
the
it-
end, this was
you
a
should
much
probably
larger
limit-
project.
Provided or anticipate that certain kinds of changes can be approved by staff or review committee, and that not everything has to go back to city commission because there's a timing issue. And so if every small change has to go back.
Yeah. At a
then-
bank, you have like a 5%
Yeah,
kind of gimme.
or that
Right.
say even like, I mean, on a tax credit. To your point that, there's a original applicant, but the partnership is not formed until the partnership's formed, and then those entities are there. So they can't actually, there's no legal entity to loan the money to, but the
Oh,
actual,
so that's always gonna change.
yeah, that's
yeah.
always gonna change. So that's
It's coming.
is coming, and then, but there needs to be, you're making the loan, the responsible party is related to these entities, or not unrelated entities, or they're not turning around and
Right.
selling.
Yeah.
The original application comes in with ABC
You should
company.
say,
and
yeah.
it gets
United Partners
converted
or
into
TBD
XYZ
LLC.
company.
Yeah.
Because it was
So-
all the same.
all the same-
Humans, all the
Yeah.
humans were the same, right? And so that's why we added in. And clearly, any of this language can be changed, right? But wanted to add in a suggestion at the bottom of that page that, how do we allow for the alternative ownership structure?
Oh,
or
it
the
is
name,
written as staff,
right?
okay.
And
That's a good-
so,
Yeah,
That makes sense.
and so some of that, to make sure that they're getting what they need, right? So it was one of those where I think they needed the copy of what the commission voted, right? Well, the wrong name was in that because that was what, right? And so some of those kinds of things that we figured out going forward. I want to make sure that it is very clear to everyone in this discussion that there is nothing wrong with Twin Creek. Like, this was wonderful. It's just what sort of things did we
Sure.
maybe not know to anticipate, or things that'll make it easier for a project, clearer for an applicant? How do we make this, more user friendly and make it something where payments are being made, funds are there for the next entity, knowing that when we've had some discussions about potential projects that might be coming forward, there aren't any yet, but some of the ones that we've heard about in the community that we know potentially have some interest would potentially ask for the $1 million, and then we'd have $100,000 each year going into it, right? So
And
just thinking about
we
that.
talked about that when we were talking about the application, because I was the naysayer too, to say, but then half our money's gone for 18 years. And
Mhm.
everyone else had very valid points to say, well, it's better than sitting in the bank. So yeah, get the money out the door.
Yeah.
So if the first $1 million in, then to request it.
Yeah,
and
the
the
$100,000
millions gone.
is helpful, but the city may. I mean, if it's really is investment.
well, if we could demonstrate success in the program, then the city has.
Let's put another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we can't give away our other $1 million, then yeah, how are we gonna get more money?
Right, yeah.
But I've heard it's like there isn't. It's not because of a lack of need. It's kind of the same thing on the statewide 9% tax credits, which have always had like 5 times as many applications than were funded. This past year, it was they funded about what they received applications, and so we know, like certain legislators, they see the money's not needed, it's not that, it's just
Right.
the cost of everything, so, I don't know. You know, MS means standard, you know, the estimating architecture thing, and so HUD, so for certain things, they make you use that for their thing, and so we're getting ready for our repositioning, so we do our estimating using that, and we put out a project, our architect did it, we did a little test to see an exterior improvement, siding, insulation, windows, doors on a couple more sites,
Mhm.
and put that out for bid, but they did a detailed CWG, top-notch firm, down to the bells and whistles and the standard, and it came back 75% higher. And that's what you're hearing, so like on the tax credit line, so I know projects that were funded with tax credits are coming back to the Board of Housing asking for,
Yeah. Or
they're like, the limit, I think right now is 340,000 per unit, which sounds outrageous, but some have come back, we're seeing costs of over 400,000 asking for a waiver, and some will, you know, people say, oh, well, that's, if we just gave it to my friend with the pickup truck, he can go over and build you houses for, you know, it's a different game, but the costs, it's not like the developer, affordable housing developer isn't necessarily, you know, you have to make sure that it's not going in their pocket, but it's really contractors are writing their own, they don't, you know, you don't cross the street without for under $100,000, you know, it's like for contractors, they really are so busy, they're like, if you have a workforce, a lot of people don't have a workforce,
Right.
so, but if you
Right.
have, and you gotta train one, and you can pretty much charge whatever you want to do deals, so. It's-
Excuse me, Michael, and everyone else, I apologize, but I'm gonna have to leave early. I got double booked at 3:30, so.
I am in the same boat. I have a meeting with a developer, HHA in 15 minutes, so good conversation. I don't wanna, should we schedule, when would we like, we're planning to have another application round. I don't know what our timeline is for the next
I
application
think
round.
we were talking about doing spring,
So the
we're
tax,
doing spring and fall, right?
Yeah.
However, if we need to make changes to this document before an entity applies, we might need to push it to later spring.
But I
I
guess-
think we were gonna have them doing, please don't quote me, I think we were gonna have them do in June,
well,
so they would know if they were funded before they went to
so the,
October Board of Housing, right?
so
Wasn't that what we were gonna do?
the tax credit application would be, so the letter of intents are in April, so it wouldn't necessarily need to be in hand before then, but if you really want to get the benefit, the application will, if you're invited then to make the application deadline will be sometime first week of August for award in October.
Yes, I think we
So-
wanted to make
so-
sure they were
If you want to
considered
consider
before,
before
that
the
August,
application,
yeah.
yes. So, or consider it would be strengthen your application if you can be awarded, though you could update something, you could make reference that we're under application, but it'd be a stronger position, and they would know what their funding is looking like. My question is, we're scheduled for March 12th. Do we want to do something in February, have a meeting and finish this review? Or is that possible?
I will not be here for that meeting,
What, on March
Um,
12th?
the February, what would be the February meeting?
Okay, I mean, we could pick a time that people are be fixed.
Can we
You can
change
send out-
meeting dates? Is
We
that
can.
allowable?
We can, we just need to find a date and time that is agreeable for everyone, so if you wanna take some time, check calendars, we can send out.
I mean, we could wait to March 12th, I suppose, and but
And this would give you time to review the documents,
See what some of the
send any
thoughts are,
suggestions.
I guess be prepared to discuss. right?
like specific,
Yeah.
any specific wording changes. Overall change, because I think this discussion was really helpful for the overall theory behind it, process, what the intent is. But then to make sure the actual language matches what continued intent is, would probably be what we would line item on March, and then make the recommendations to the commission that would be the new guidelines. So we could look for a
Comfortable
different,
with that as long as, I mean, I'm not sure that I know what the ramifications are timeline wise, et cetera, but it seems to me anyway, that we still would have
Time, yeah.
time.
Okay, so let's send
Do you
that out
wanna-
with the thing, we'll do March 12th. And we'll just go from there.
those say, cause we can do February, but yeah, if you'll take
No,
some
I think
time
March
and look
12th,
at
I think March
this,
12th could work.
and then really think about comparing to the resolutions, what all of you know, having been here when these were created. What, you know, the whole question of does an and or an or really change, right? Because sometimes it does. So what sort of inadvertent changes do we not want to make, because a change of one or two words here or there could potentially change the intent,
Okay.
right? So to
So-
make sure that it's still a
Let's-
usable
yeah.
program.
Let's we'll all commit to do a deep read into this and be prepared on March 12th.
Yeah, I can
And go from there.
That's for sure.
So we'll move along from there. Thanks, Ann, for that very informative conversation.
We need to take
Next is a public comment.
We have
We'd invite public comment from anyone from the public who's on. Or seeing none, we'll close public comment. We'll take communications from the members, the board members, and additional proposals for the next agenda. Any requests?
No.
Next meeting is March 12th at 2:00. Any other announcements? I would encourage folks to participate. What we're really lacking is state resources. We're one of the few states in the nation that does not invest general fund dollars. There is a state low-income housing tax credit bill in front of House taxation on 9 to noon on Friday. 21, I think. And House taxation has, I think, 3 fellow legislators, so. When I have
there's always
the sheet, I'll send it around to the group here. If you wanna send a quick, hey. And we really don't have any worry, you're gonna support the bill. It's really, if you have any friends in Trout Creek.
Yeah, so
Who
many.
can speak to the need for affordable housing, you might have them contact her. Call through the chair. But anyway, and anything else for agendas? No. We take a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second.
All second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Alrighty.
everybody.
Sorry, I gotta run.